We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? Uh-huh. What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hello, listeners. This is Paula Schaffner with episode 61, Mork Meets Robin Williams. This first aired on February 19th, 1981. In a sense, the title is pretty self-explanatory, but in case you're wondering about the logistics, IMDb offers more than the usual one or two sentence summary. Mindy brings home a record of Robin Williams' reality. What a concept! And notices that Mork greatly resembles the comedian on the album cover. Mork doesn't see it, but the people in Boulder do because they think he is Robin. Robin happens to be coming to Boulder for a live show, and Mork is nearly trampled by crazed fans. Mindy gets to interview Robin and brings Mork with her. This was the 49th episode, directed by Howard Storm. It was written by the team of Dale McRaven and Bruce Johnson, McRaven's 10th and Johnson's 8th, and this was their first script since Dueling Skates. There's a sunny exterior of the house with snow on the ground, but this time we get an icicles effect overlaid, and I don't know if that has any symbolic meaning. Mindy is in the living room wearing a blue skirt, a matching blazer, and a red top. She's on the phone. She says she knows he's a big star. That's why she wants to interview him for KTNS. This does tie in with Mindy's job, and in fact, we'll see her boss again. She finds out that she has to go through his manager, Mr. Mora, so she wants Mr. Mora's secretary to return her call. She thanks the person she's talking to and hangs up. With her hand on her hip and looking frustrated and confused, she wonders if Woodward and Bernstein had this much trouble trying to get to Nixon. And of course, they never actually interviewed Nixon before they helped to bring about his downfall. Mork descends the attic stairs to applause, squeals, and whistles. He's in a white shirt, a black jacket, and black slacks, his red bow tie and suspenders. He's also wearing black and white sneakers. He models the outfit to more audience reaction. He asks Mindy how she likes his new threads. He says, "Aren't they incredible?" It actually looks like some other outfits we've seen him wear when he's dressing up, but maybe they're new.
Do you think it's more Sears or GQ?
We get him contrasting different modeling styles from the everyday with Sears and the high fashion end with GQ, short for Gentleman's Quarterly. Mindy wonders what he's so dressed up for. He says it's picture day at the daycare center. This is the last we hear about picture day or even the daycare center. It's just thrown in there. He asks how he looks.
Oh, you look real nice, except don't forget to hold in your stomach.
Well, what are you dressed up for, Min?
Oh, I've got a big interview today. How do I look?
Oh, real nice, but don't forget to hold in your thighs.
They're treading an interesting line here where it's kind of flirty, but it's also teasing each other with friendly insults like friends or even siblings. And I guess he's dressed up so that they can talk about why she's dressed up. He wonders who she's going to interview. She takes both his hands and says she's so excited. Dewey Fishbeck, their feature writer, is out with the mumps, and as you may recall, he had the croup previously. Mr. Sternhagen, her boss, wants her to interview someone. If you haven't seen the previous episode set at KTNS, that is a little bit of exposition. She says he'll never guess who she's interviewing. He guesses Rula Lenska. This was a British actress who actually would have been best known to American audiences for her various commercials where she would say, "This is Rula Lenska for what have you." Mork's next guess is Menachem Begin, who we've talked about before. Then he gives up and eagerly asks who Mindy is going to interview.
Robin Williams. Robin Williams.
Oh.
What's so funny about that?
Does he really call himself Robin?
Yeah.
Do you know what Robin means on Orc?
No. Oh, that's disgusting.
Don't look at me. I didn't give him that smutty name. Parents must have had a sense of humor, though, man.
It's interesting to hear the audience's reaction to this. This is a tricky episode to describe. It's sort of fourth wall breaking, but Robin Williams exists in this universe. He is a separate person, and somehow Mork has never heard of him, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. It's interesting that Robin has a smutty, possibly disgusting meaning in Orkin. I'm sure that Robin Williams as Mork enjoyed doing that joke. There's a bit of irony about him talking about Robin Williams' parents having a sense of humor, because that does come up in Robin Williams' biographies, that his mother in particular had a sense of humor that shaped his. Mork and Mindy go over to sit at the dining table. Mindy still can't believe that Mork has never heard of Robin Williams. She says that Robin is a comedian, a star of TV, movies, and nightclubs. As you may recall, Mork went to see Popeye not long ago. So did he not realize that Popeye was played by Robin Williams? And we know that in any case, Mork consumes a lot of TV. Whatever TV show that Robin Williams is appearing on in this universe, Mork hasn't seen it. Mindy says that Robin Williams is in town right now doing a big solar energy benefit. And solar energy was very trendy at that time. In fact, there was a whole thing about President Carter putting solar energy panels on the White House, which Ronald Reagan had taken down when he came into office. And then Mindy starts primping her hair at that little rotating mirror that we've seen in a couple other episodes, the one with the stand, and it's on the dining table. I didn't know if that had some kind of symbolic meaning with mirrors and selves and so on, but probably it's just she wants her hair to look nice in case she ends up getting a chance to do the interview. Mork still doesn't know what the big deal is. Why does she want to talk to Robin Williams? She says a lot of people on Earth are real interested to hear what stars have to say, which is still true. She's waiting for his manager to call her back about setting up an appointment. Then she says, you look a little bit like him. He says, Mio? She says, yeah, you-o. She goes to get Robin Williams' album to show Mork. He scoffs. We again see a completely different record player than the one in 12 Angry Appliances. She hands the album, which we know from the synopsis is Reality What a Concept, to Mork and says Mork looks a lot like him. Mork says this guy is going to drown if he goes outside in the rain. She turns the album right side up. They smile at each other. He gestures that it went right over his head, or that he's being dense, as we've seen him do before. I think part of the implication is that he thinks that Robin Williams has a big nose, because that will come up shortly.
Scoff, scoff. I mean, April Frinkles Day.
Come on, Mark. You look exactly like him.
Oh, no. Come on now, man. Look at that there. Look at that. I mean, it looks like he does his hair with a Cuisinart. Man, he's got a roadmap for eyes. You could pack a family in that nose, man. I mean, look at that mouth, too. They had to airbrush his entire face. Are you kidding? Oh, man, listen, I'm bright and cheery, and this guy's got big problems.
So we've got Mork making fun of Robin Williams' appearance, and I thought that was an interesting way to take this. I think that there was a certain aspect of self-deprecation to Robin Williams, and he probably enjoyed insulting himself one remove. There's reference to a Cuisinart when Mork says, this guy's got big problems. It was like, oh, more than we knew. There's an exterior of the TV station with some blue in the sky, but there's snow on the mountains and in the foreground. Mr. Sternhagen in voiceover asks Mindy when the interview with Robin Williams will be. He's sitting at his desk, which now has a phone, pencils, and just generally different clutter than when he did the job interviews. Also, for some reason, there are a bunch of big plants, I think rubber tree plants, over by the news desk. Mindy seems to have been watering them with the watering can that we can see sitting on the news desk. She comes over and sits down. She says she's having a little trouble with that, meaning the interview. Mr. Williams won't return any of her calls. She wonders how you can reach someone who's inaccessible. Mr. Sternhagen says, inaccessible? Last night, Mr. Williams dropped into the comedy cabaret and performed for nothing. And I think this is actually something that Robin Williams would do, including decades later, that he would just drop into a comedy club and do a set. There are and were some comedy clubs in Boulder, but I'm guessing the comedy cabaret didn't actually exist. Mindy wonders how she was supposed to know. Mr. Sternhagen says even he knew about it. He heard it from Armando, the fellow who's fumigating his office. We never actually see Armando, but he gets a couple mentions. Mindy is surprised that Armando got to see one of Robin Williams' shows. Mr. Sternhagen says no, Mr. Williams mentioned it to Armando today at lunch. Robin introduced himself to everyone at Da Vinci's restaurant. Mindy stands up again in disbelief. She can't believe that Robin Williams was at Remo and Jeannie's restaurant. Since she refers to them by first name, Mr. Sternhagen wonders if these are friends of hers. She says not anymore, and we'll find out how she feels about that in a little bit. Mindy promises that she'll get the interview somehow. He can count on her. Mr. Sternhagen says good, the owner of the station is putting pressure on him, and Mindy knows how he handles pressure. He takes a liquor bottle out of his desk drawer. She smiles in a worried way, and he taps his fingers like he's impatient. This is a reminder that Mr. Sternhagen is a part-time drunk, as we saw in his previous episode. There's a close-up of the outdoor menu for Da Vinci's restaurant. We can see that inside the restaurant is very crowded with people dressed for winter. Mindy is in jeans, and this time not as ugly a sweater as we saw before, but still kind of ugly. It's fuzzy with red and gray. Jeannie is also in jeans. She's wearing a gray stripe colored blouse and a red string tie, so very much the season 3 style Jeannie. She walks by Mindy's table and cheerfully asks if Mindy's done with the menu. Mindy flatly says no. Jeannie says whoops and chuckles apologetically. Mindy tells Jeannie that she's mad at her. Jeannie is surprised and asks what she did. Mindy reminds her that she's been trying to get an interview with Robin Williams. He was here yesterday and Jeannie didn't even call her. The timeline on this episode is fairly straightforward. I guess we're on day 2. Jeannie stutters a sincere apology and says that the place was crazy yesterday, so probably she was just so busy and overwhelmed by Robin Williams being there and people making a fuss over him and so on. Mindy says all right, but she still looks unhappy. Nelson comes over and he's wearing jeans with a red jacket, a sweater that looks kind of like a ski sweater, and possibly a white colored shirt underneath that. He says, "Hi Scouts, what's going on?" And I don't know if that's a reference to Mindy being a Girl Scout or it's just him doing his awkward greeting thing. He says the place is so crowded he had to park in the back. Mindy says she did too. Jeannie excitedly tells Nelson that Robin Williams came in here for lunch yesterday. Everybody's waiting for him to come back. Presumably the people who went told their friends, and so the crowd has grown from yesterday. Nelson says how tacky, and then he asks Mindy what she's doing here. Smiling, she says she's tackily waiting for Robin Williams to come back. Remo comes over and touches Jeannie's back. He reminds her that they have a lot of customers. With big eyes and a wide smile, she tells Mindy and Nelson that this is a new experience for her, because as we saw in season 2, the deli was not doing very well despite all of Remo's promotional ideas. I'm glad that the restaurant is doing better. She goes over to silently confer with Remo. Nelson sits down. He says, "Mindy McConnell, I'm ashamed of you, hanging around here like some kind of groupie." She says, "Now that hurts, Nelson." And then she tells him that she's supposed to interview Robin for the station. She says it seems like everybody in town has met him except her. Nelson is sure she's exaggerating. And of course he hasn't met Robin Williams, but doesn't seem to bother him. Remo returns to show them Polaroids. Polaroids were still fairly new in the early 80s with the Instamatic pictures. They were affordable and quick, and that makes sense that he would have a camera like that. There's a picture of Robin Williams and Remo, Robin Williams and Jeannie, and Robin and Armando the bug guy. Nelson says that's a good picture. Mindy still can't believe that the bug man gets to meet Robin Williams. She says she should have taken fumigation in college instead of journalism. She stands and takes her coat off the chair. She excuses herself. She has to go because she's getting a headache. And I presume she goes home. Not too much time elapses before the next scene. Nelson says, boy, is she upset. And Remo just doesn't seem to care. Jeannie was sympathetic. Nelson is, for him, pretty sympathetic. And Remo's just excited about what this is doing for his business. He shows Nelson a picture of Robin autographing the chopped liver with his finger. Remo's going to have this picture permaplaqued and presumably hung up in the restaurant. Nelson says good penmanship, and he notices that Robin made a happy face in the O.
Excuse me? Well, for the owner of the car with the New Mexico license plate, will you please claim your car at the bottom of the hill? You forgot to set your handbrake.
Look, everyone, it's Robin! It's Robin!
My name is Mork. What's your language?
So that's Robin Williams, huh? You know, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but he looks a little bit like Mork.
You're right. I think you're crazy. Oh, look, they caught him.
No big deal. With the money he makes, he can afford new clothes. You really shouldn't toss him up in the air like that.
In this little bit, we get to see Hillary Horan as young girl. She has just a few mostly Gary Marshall related credits from 75 to 82, including most notably at least 37 appearances on Happy Days. If you're looking for the most recognizable character is the female drummer who sometimes plays with Richie's band. I don't know her age, but she must have been at least 25 by then, so to call her a young girl makes it sound like she's a teenager. I thought it was interesting that Nelson and Remo assume that this is Robin Williams, but they probably didn't get a good look at Mork when he first came in because of the crowd. And again, Remo is less sympathetic than Nelson, like when he says that with the money that Robin Williams makes, he can afford new clothes. It's interesting that they choose to show the attack, which is what it basically is, from the perspective of Nelson and Remo, and they play it for laughs. We get a different angle on the house. There's a blue sky and still snow on the ground. Mindy is on the phone again in the same outfit as in the previous scene. She says to tell Mr. Williams that Barbara Walters called. And no, she's not doing a Barbara Walters impression. When Robin calls back, he should ask for her secretary, Mindy. Then she says thank you and hangs up. She again looks worried. There's a knock. She goes to the door. It's Mr. Sternhagen. She tells him to come on in, and he says thank you. He stumbles in. Then he wonders where she went. So clearly he's drunk. The pressure did get to him. She asks him if he just came from lunch. So I guess she went over to the Da Vinci's restaurant midday, figuring that Robin Williams was there at lunch before, so that would be the most likely time he'd return. Mr. Sternhagen stutters yes. Then he stutters that he knows she can't tell, but he had 2 or 3 little drinks, and he holds up 5 fingers. He knew he was in trouble when Mrs. Ovitz, the woman who owns the station, plied him with drinks at lunchtime. We find out here that the owner of the station is a woman. Plying him with drinks sounds like she's going to seduce him, so I don't know if that's a deliberate implication. And we again get the word or name Ovitz, which has come up before and will again, particularly in season 4. What I've learned since the last episode where we had Ovitz is that Michael Stephen Ovitz, who was born in 1946 and as of this recording is still alive, was one of the co-founders of the Creative Artists Agency. He was an agent to, among others, Tom Cruise, Dustin Hoffman, Kevin Costner, John Belushi, Michael Douglas, Bill Murray, Sylvester Stallone, Barbra Streisand, and Penny Marshall. I don't think he was Robin Williams' agent, but it's not too far-fetched to think that the writers on a Gary Marshall show would have heard of him. Mrs. Ovitz said that if Sternhagen doesn't get the interview, Sternhagen is out.
And if I'm out, guess who's going with me?
Me.
No, you.
I have to say, Mindy is remarkably patient with Mr. Sternhagen, even when he touches her, and that happened as well in his previous episode. She says she's tried everything, including lying. He says that's good. She tried bribery. I don't know who she bribed. He says that's real good. She says she even tried to buy tickets to Robin Williams' concert so she could sneak backstage to meet him, but they're sold out.
Well, you're in a you're up a creek, kiddo. The same thing happened to me in New York when I was big in the network. The president said I had to deliver someone or I was out.
Well, what'd you do?
Does this look like New York to you?
We can again see special guest star Foster Brooks' comic timing here. Obviously, this is something that he had perfected over decades, but it's used well here. In contrast, I didn't really feel like the Da Vinci's or Nelson were really necessary to the episode. It's okay that they're here, but they don't really add anything. We also get a bit more background on Mr. Sternhagen at the network, and I think it was CBS because of Walter Cronkite. Mr. Sternhagen stutters and burps, and he says that he's got to go, but he heads over to the armoire. She goes over and grabs his arm. She gently asks if he drove over there. He says that's his little beauty out there parked in her hedge. She gently says she doesn't think he should drive. She thinks he should take a little nap. So it's interesting that she is doing her caretaking thing, and she's also preventing the crime of drunk driving. Then he says he can do that while he's driving. That is, he can nap while he drives, and this is supposed to be funny. She guides him over to her bedroom door. In so many words, she says that she wants him to nap in her bed. And nothing comes of this. It just gets him out of the room. We don't have a thing of she comes home and here's this stinking drunk still in her bed. He wants her to fix him some cookies and warm bourbon instead of cookies and milk. He wobbles into her bedroom. And I'll just mention right now, nobody closes her bedroom door. He could hear the conversation that's about to happen, but I'm just going to assume that he passes out. Otherwise, he would be sitting on top of a huge news story.
Don't panic.
I'm not panicking.
Well, I have no reason to panic, man. They're not after you.
Who's after you and why?
The entire town, men. They know I'm an alien. They chase me. They tore my clothes. They pursue me with fountain pens. Just because I'm different doesn't make me a bad guy, does it, men? I mean, I say my prayers. I pet my vegetables. I put my pants on like everybody else, head first.
How could they find out you're an alien?
I don't know. But they call me filthy names.
Did they call you Robin?
That's disgusting.
They think you're Robin Williams.
Who?
There was so much, particularly in the first season, about the threat of Mork's identity being revealed, people finding out he's an alien, and we haven't had that so much lately, but here he thinks everyone has found him out. Mindy figures out what's actually going on, and it's cute that he pets his vegetables like they're pets, and I thought it was interesting that he says his prayers, although we're still not clear what his religious background is, although yeah, he did almost become a priest. We find out that he puts his pants on head first, which may be a carryover from him sitting on his face. We get some very brief hand-holding. We get the little callback where she says Robin and he's disgusted. She reminds him that Robin Williams is the guy who looks like him, which, you would think a doppelganger is not something that would be easily forgotten, even if you don't see a resemblance. Mork says the bozo on the album. This is interesting that he uses that common insult of his for Robin Williams, and then later we'll hear that Robin Williams calls Mork a bozo. Mork still doesn't think that he looks anything like Robin Williams. He still thinks that people have figured out that he's an alien. He thinks if they catch him, they'll tar and feather him and put him on That's Incredible, which is, I think, our third or fourth reference to That's Incredible. The audience laughs and claps. Mindy laughs a little and says it's okay. She insists that people think he's Robin Williams. Mork starts to say, assuming she's right, but then he says she's way off base, off in left field, baseball, going, where am I? He wonders if they would tear Robin Williams' clothes off. She admits they would. He says, but she told him that they liked Robin Williams. She says they do. That's why they want his clothes. And I don't remember the details, but I think there was an incident where early in Robin Williams' fame, a crowd surrounded him and tore his clothes. I think he hid in a phone booth or something. It comes up in the Robin Williams biography, Robin, by Dave Itzkoff, which I recommend if you haven't read it yet. Mork makes a buzzing noise and again does the over my head gesture because this just doesn't make any sense to him. He says if they didn't like Robin Williams, Mork would be in real trouble. He'd be jacked up on 4 blocks with nothing left but his kneecaps, like he's a car that's been vandalized. Mindy says it's not quite that either. She suggests he come with her that night. He'll see how much he looks like Robin Williams. She has to go down to the auditorium and try and interview him. She looks upward and says it's her last shot. Mork asks what she's going to do. She says she'll hang around the stage door till he shows up. He says, like some groupie? And she says, exactly. Both Nelson and Mork compare her to a groupie, although obviously she's not going to have sex with Robin Williams. Mork says he'll go with her as her escort, but he's got to get a disguise. He again insists that people are out to get him because he's an alien. There's a nighttime exterior of an auditorium. There's no sign of snow. There's a close-up of a sign saying Solar Energy Benefits starring Robin Williams in concert. And there's no visuals or anything. It's just probably thrown together fairly quickly. We zoom out a bit and we see Mork and Mindy strolling in their coats. She has a fluffy-looking white scarf. He's wearing a bowler hat and Groucho glasses. And that's his disguise, but I thought it was ironic that he is using elements that suggest other comics, not just Groucho Marx, but also Charlie Chaplin. There's a sign on the wall that says Boulder Auditorium. Mindy wishes he'd take off the silly-looking glasses. As they approach the crowd, he says it's the perfect disguise. Everyone thinks he's from L.A. I didn't get that. To prove his point, Mork approaches a tall man and tells him that there are no aliens from outer space in this area. The man, who's holding the reality album, nods warily. Mindy pulls Mork aside and tells him that his disguise is starting to attract attention. He doesn't believe this. She says he'd be much less conspicuous if he took off the nose, pulled down his hat, and turned up his collar. She insists that he trusts her. He reluctantly gives in. He takes off his glasses and says, "For you." A man in a green hat says, "Look, it's him! It's Robin Williams!" The crowd screams and shouts and tries to rush Mork. Mindy looks surprised and scared, like she couldn't have seen this coming, even though she knows that there's this big resemblance and Mork has not yet pulled down his hat or turned up his collar. They head towards the stage door, which a guard opens. The guard tells the crowd to stop it. People step back. He says, "Right this way, Mr. Williams." Mork says, "Thank you." Mindy says she's with him. The guard asks, "Is she with you, sir?" Mork says, "Trust me, men." And to the guard he says, "I've never seen this woman before in my life." Mindy looks shocked and says, "What?" Mork says, "Just kidding, officer," and he bark laughs. And I think this is because Mindy told Mork to trust her, and her advice didn't really work, and so this is kind of payback, although obviously he was not going to leave her outside. Mork says, "Actually, this is his brother, who likes to dress up a little bit." The guard looks at Mindy. Mork takes her hand and says, "Come along, Roland." So again, teasing each other, and yes, more with cross-dressing. The crowd screams and shouts again. They rush the doors, and I can see some of them are waving albums and autograph books. We switch to Robin Williams' dressing room. There's a lot of brown and ecru, but there's also a bowl of pink flowers on the coffee table to brighten things up, and there's also trail mix there. We'll see in other shots that there are pictures of various musicians, I guess, rock stars. I didn't really recognize anybody, but to give that sense that this is an auditorium. And for some reason, there's another rubber tree plant in the corner, so maybe they got a sale that week. The room is empty, and then the guard opens the door and says, "Here's your dressing room, Mr. Williams." Mork is just behind him, followed by Mindy. A light flashes like a flash bulb. The guard says if there's anything he can do for Mr. Williams, just let him know. Mork would like a new pair of retinas. The guard says, "Hard to believe you get paid for that," and he exits, shutting the door behind him. The audience is amused. Although it's not clear here whether this scene was actually shot in front of a studio audience because of the technical effect we're going to get. It's possible that it was shot ahead of time and then played back for them in the studio, because I've seen that technique. Mork and Mindy's coats are now open, and we get more of a glimpse of their outfits, which I won't describe because I'm going to shortly be playing you a lengthy clip, and you can just see the outfits for yourself. Mindy says, "Wow, do you believe it, Mork? We're in Robin Williams' dressing room, about to meet him." Mork still doesn't see what the big deal is. She says, "Are you kidding? People stand in line for hours just to get a glimpse of a star, let alone meet one." Very excited, she says, "And we're about to meet a big star." He says, "Oh, poor little starstruck Mindy. Calm that perky little heart of yours. Don't you understand that a star is just a big ball of glowing hot gas?" Robin Williams is an ordinary human who's been hyped by an advertising campaign. We get again the thing of Mindy allegedly being perky and Mork being very literal about what a star is, and again Mork commenting on Robin and with that extra layer that maybe on some level he saw himself as an ordinary human being who'd been hyped by an advertising campaign. And for part of this, Mork has his hand on Mindy's arm, so there's some light touching going on in this episode. Mork says personally he'd rather be home flossing his ears, and we learned or relearned recently that organ ears can be unscrewed.
You know, you look a lot like... No, he's a woman now.
Excuse me, Mr. Williams, but I have a big favor to ask of you. I know you don't know me and I don't want to impose, but I'm supposed to get an interview with you for KTNS, and if I don't, I'll be fired.
Oh, yeah. It's been a bad year for her. She bet on Carter, Roberta Duran, and she had to buy Chrysler stock, too. Well, I got a minute. My manager's not here, and sure, why not?
Thank you. I can't believe it. Oh, thank you. You're doing me such a big favor. I don't believe it. Oh, this is my friend Mork.
Oh, hello.
And I'm Mindy McConnell.
You're not from the Inquirer, are you?
Pardon me?
Oh, little joke.
No. Boy, you sure are a hard man to get in touch with.
Yeah, you have tighter security than the Pope. Boy, she couldn't get past your manager, secretary's answering machine.
Would you please?
Sorry.
I know you've probably been asked this question a lot, but what's it like to be a celebrity?
Well, not bad, really. It's especially nice when you can get into restaurants at those really shishy places where they wouldn't even let you wash the floors before.
I have another question right now, a little fashion byline. Why do you wear baggy pants?
I don't want a visible panty line.
Here's your headline right there, men. Robin Williams, kinky.
Well, you're a member of the Brotherhood of the Bozo. What do you wear?
Oh, that's where I keep my bees.
Do you mind?
Back off, yeah.
Mr. Williams, I don't know how you keep up the pace. I mean, you arrive from Hawaii, fly all night, and then go straight to the university and lecture for 3 hours.
Oh, that was a fluke, you see. The pilot of the flight I was on has a daughter who attends drama class here, and he asked if I'd talk to her class to return his favor.
Oh, what was the favor?
Well, he said if I'd lecture, he'd pull out of the dive.
Oh, interesting concept. Men blackmail by gravity. Write that down. That's news.
But then after the lecture, you performed until 3 a.m. at the Comedy Cabaret. And now you're doing 2 shows tonight.
Well, 2 reasons. See, I'm a performing addict. I can't get enough of it. And also, the owner of the Comedy Cabaret is a friend of a cousin of a friend of a friend of a so-and-so. And, well, I couldn't say no.
Gee, that's a great angle for my story. Robin Williams, the comedian who can't say no.
Excuse me. My dinner flew away. You mind if I have some of your star munchies?
Sure, why not? I was hoping you'd go for the trail mix. I can't believe this man's actually grazing in front of me. Well, back to you. I'm sorry to avoid you. I don't know why I can't say no. I guess I want people to like me. I hate myself for that. But I used to be able to say no.
What do you mean?
Well, before all this craziness started, my friends used to call up and go, Robin, come on, we're all going outside. It's really, there's some gnarly waves. We can all hang out, and I'd have to go,
No, my mama said I have to stay inside and read Nietzsche tonight.
later on, I guess I felt really afraid to say no to them because then they all say like, oh, Robin Williams, Mr. Smarty Pants Big Shot. Wow, you forgot your old friends. You can't lend me $10,000 for a new car. You won't do the Save the Shrimp benefit.
This is none of my business, but it seems like if they're really your friends, they'd understand. But it seems to me you can't say no to a total stranger.
You're right.
It also looks like you're probably taken advantage of a lot. You know, if you learn to say no, you'd probably have a lot more time to yourself.
Maybe that's the last thing I want.
There's a lot to break down here, so I'm just going to take it roughly in order. Robin Williams has to check the name on the door to be sure that it's really him, but he takes it pretty well that there are people in his dressing room and one of them looks like him. There's more with gender bending where he starts to say that Mork looks like somebody he knows, but nah, that guy is a woman now. I don't really need to explain about Mindy betting on Carter over Reagan. Roberto Duran was a very successful professional boxer. During a rematch against Sugar Ray Leonard gained a slight lead and began taunting and mocking Duran. Towards the end of the 8th round, Duran suddenly stopped fighting and apparently said no mas, meaning no more, and he quit boxing for a while, although he did come back in 1982. The Chrysler Corporation was not doing well at that time, so Mindy buying stock in it, which seems unlikely, would not be a good idea. Mork's joke about the Inquirer has to do with that tabloid frequently running very hostile articles about various celebrities, in some cases getting sued by them. And there's another reference to the Pope, which would be ironic by the time this hit summer reruns, because on May 13th of 1981, Pope John Paul II was shot and wounded He did survive, but the line about the security obviously looked different after that. We can see that Mork has his silver notebook, and he's taking notes, as well as Mindy. Hers, of course, are for the interview, while his presumably will be for his report to Orson. We get Robin and Mork teasing each other about wearing baggy pants. Mork calling Robin kinky. There's a changing screen in the room as well, so when Robin goes behind that, that allows Mork to go over to the other side of the room. Obviously, for part of this scene, they had to use a double, and the hair doesn't look quite right for either of them. Mork, even though he's not from the Inquirer, seems to be looking for a scandalous article, and he wants Mindy to write down about Robin being blackmailed by gravity. We find out that he performed at the Comedy Cabaret until 3 a.m. after the lecture, so that, I guess, would be day 0 that he arrived in town and gave the lecture, and then sometime, maybe about 9 hours after he finished his set at the Comedy Cabaret, he went to the Da Vinci's restaurant. Robin says that he's a performing addict, and he couldn't say no, and we hear a little bit more about this as the scene goes on. When Mork eats flowers, which he did more in the first season, but it comes up every once in a while, Robin Williams can't believe it. So even though he's a peculiar person, Mork is even stranger, but he's pretty cool with it. Maybe he figures it's bolder. They're weird people here. Robin says he wants people to like him, and he hates himself for that. And it's like some of the other lines, it stands a joke, but there's some really heartbreaking stuff to me. I felt like there were glimpses into the real Robin in that line in particular. It sounds like his friends like to go surfing while he wanted to read Nietzsche. His friends will think he's changed if he says no. And Mindy, sounding a bit like Carol Brady, says that if they were your real friends, they would understand. But she does have some insights into him. I thought that said something about her character, that she is a very intelligent, sensitive person, and maybe living with Mork has helped her to better understand somebody like Robin Williams, and I think that that's a good sign for her being a journalist. She says if Robin learned to say no, he might have more time for himself. And he says maybe that's the last thing he wants. And again, it's like, heartbreaking. There's a knock. The guard enters, and we can hear crowd noises in the background. The guard tells Mork, 5 minutes, Mr. Williams, although it's not actually 5 minutes. And then when Robin Williams thanks him, the guard looks confused. That's the last we see of the guard. He's played by Rance Howard, the father of Ron and Clint, and he was then 52. He lived until 2017. He had many, many roles from 1956 to somehow a few posthumous ones, including one from 2023. He had a memorable role as the doctor on an episode about adoption for Laverne and Shirley, and he had 3 different roles on Happy Days from 76 to 79, so during the later years that Ron was on the show. I haven't mentioned Johnny Decker as the man. I'm not sure which man he is. I assume it's the man in the green hat. He just had a few roles from Psycho a Go-Go in 1965 to Archie Bunker's Place in 1983. He doesn't really make much of an impression, but he's there. Getting back to Rance Howard, I did like what he brought to the character of the guard. It's a very small role, but he put some little spins on it, and we see that although he's respectful towards Robin Williams for the most part, or who he thinks is Robin Williams, he's not starstruck, because he's probably seen a lot of stars at the auditorium, and he's just doing his job.
You didn't get much of an interview. I hope you're not disappointed.
Disappointed? Are you kidding? You're breaking a perky little heart.
This interview means that much to you. Tell you what I'm going to do for you. I'll put off my flight. Tomorrow morning when my managers are asleep, I'll sneak down to the TV station and do an on-camera interview with you.
You do an on-camera interview with me? Oh, I can't believe it. I mean, I was just supposed to write this up and let the anchorman read it. Oh, that is so nice. I can't believe it. Oh, wait a minute. No, I can't do that.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of a bad time for me, too. How about next July?
Mork.
Me?
We were just talking about how you can't say no. And I'm not going to be another person just to take advantage of you.
Oh, don't worry about that. I'll learn to say no some other time. Come on, watch the show from the wings.
Oh.
Oh, excuse me. One thing before you go. Today I was chased by a mob of people who wanted to tear my clothes off. Is it because they said I looked like you?
Well, there's kind of a resemblance. Sounds like you just went through Celebrity 1A. How'd it feel?
Oh, it's frightening. I mean, why do you want to take a job where they tear your clothes off and throw you in the air?
Well, actually, I became a performer by accident. See, my dad used to have this job where he had to move around a lot, and sometimes he'd leave the forwarding address.
Oh, he didn't do that.
Oh, you're right. I was kidding. Actually, he packed me in the crates with the dishes.
What a guy, man.
Anyway, I was always being like the new kid in the neighborhood, and, well, since I was suffering from a case of the terminal shy, I couldn't make friends that easily. I always spent a lot of time in my room, and I created my own little world, full of like all these little characters that had strange and unusual qualities. After a while, I realized that, well, people found these characters kind of funny and outrageous, and then I got to the point where I realized that the characters could say and do things that I was afraid to do myself. And after a little while, here I am.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robin Williams.
We're on. Take care. Wish me luck. Bonne chance. Adieu.
We can see that Robin worries about disappointing Mindy, and Mork says that he's breaking Mindy's perky little heart. So again, perky and again, heart. And so Mork is making Robin feel worse, but, you know, it's part of his protectiveness of Mindy. Robin, despite how busy he is, offers to make a sacrifice for Mindy, and she's honored by this, but then she realizes what's happening. And then Robin says he doesn't mind. So is the message that you can exploit a star if they offer? Robin does see kind of a resemblance to Mork, even if Mork doesn't. Some of what Robin says about his childhood is confirmed by that biography I already mentioned, including his parents moving around a lot, him being shy, and creating a world of characters that he eventually shared. And I thought it was sweet that he wants these two strangers to wish him good luck, and he says it in French, so something he has in common with Mork. There's an interesting balance here where he plays himself in a certain way and Mork in a certain way, so we get that contrast despite the similarities. After Robin leaves the room, Mindy says, "Listen to that applause." Mork says something like that might make torn clothes worthwhile. So there is the draw of fame despite the price. Mindy laughs. They exit with Mork looking around the room like he understands now. There's an evening exterior of the house where it's still light enough that you can see there's snow on the ground. Mork summons Orson. He says, "Come in, you're cineranimist," like he's a theater. And I noticed that Biba was not in this scene, and I think that's because this is one of the more serious reports that we get in the series. Biba would be a distraction in this episode. This week, Mork learned what it's like to be famous on Earth. Orson says that's good. Mork says sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. Most Earthlings try to be recognized for what they do, but when they become stars, most Earthlings don't, they realize they're recognized wherever they go. Orson says, "You mean they lose their privacy?" Mork says sometimes they can lose their clothes. I mean, obviously there is a price to fame, but I don't think getting your clothes ripped off is, I would say it's not the worst, but I don't think it's the most common price to being famous. Mork says being a star is a 24-hour job. You can't leave your face at the office. And we saw that with him trying to disguise a face that he shares with Robin Williams. Orson asks if fame isn't its own reward. Mork says yes, but when you become a celebrity, everybody wants a piece of you. Unless you can say no, there'll be no pieces left for yourself. So that's one of the things he learned from Robin. Orson thought all stars were rich, live in mansions, and drive big eggs. I guess that's what they're like on Ork. Mork says that's a common misconception. To get that, you pay a very heavy price. Responsibilities, anxieties, and to be honest, some of them can't take it. Orson isn't buying it. It sounds to him like they have it made. Mork says most of them do, but some are victims of their own fame.
Very special and talented people. People like Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Lenny Bruce, Freddie Prinze, and John Lennon.
I don't think I need to explain who these various celebrities are, many of whom are still iconic. Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Lenny Bruce. Freddie Prinze may not be as well known now, although his son, Freddie Prinze Jr., became a celebrity as well. He was an up-and-coming stand-up comic, one of the stars of the sitcom Chico and the Man. At that time, his 1977 death was ruled a suicide, although in 1983 it would be found to be medication-induced and accidental. John Lennon was killed by a crazed fan in December of 1980, so probably very close to the time that this episode was shot. All of these celebrities would be ones of particular significance to a baby boomer, somebody of Robin Williams' generation, but still a loss to other generations as well. Whether it's a matter of them all being victims of their own fame depends on how you define it, I guess. A lot of these celebrities died of overdoses, as would Robin Williams' friend John Belushi in 1982. Mork says these names with heartbreaking delivery. There's a sound of the wind blowing. Again, I'm not sure about the symbolism of that. It could be like the Elton John song A Candle in the Wind, which was about Marilyn Monroe and then later adapted for Princess Diana. It's sort of connected to mortality, and there's a sort of a lonely sound to it as well. I'm not positive, but I think this is the first time that we don't get a Nanu Nanu sign off. It just fades out to black and silence. When I started this podcast project, this was one of the episodes I really wanted to talk about because although it had an impact on me at the time, obviously it looks different now, more than 40 years later. It's tricky to separate all that out and just look at it as an episode. While I do feel that the scene with Robin and Mindy and Mork is powerful and the tag is also very moving, I'm not so sure about the rest of the episode. It's not bad. It's not a case like with the season opener where the first half of the episode is noticeably weaker than the second half. It's just sort of there to lay down the structure so we can get to that payoff. Like I said, we get Nelson and the Da Vinci's again, and they're okay, but they didn't really have to be there. We get Mr. Sternhagen in 2 scenes, and he's there to represent that this is hanging over Mindy, that she could lose her new job if she doesn't get this interview with Robin Williams. Mindy is starstruck by Robin Williams, but she's also just trying to do her job. So those 2 elements are playing together. I rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures how well it delivers what I'm looking for in the series. I do think this is one of the stronger episodes of season 3, but because it's uneven, I'm going to go with a 3. We have to get through this other stuff to get to what I really want to see. Another thing that was going on for me besides the thing of Robin as Mork commenting on Robin and making fun of himself, they didn't write this episode. It was McRaven and Johnson. But I kept thinking, that's Pam talking. That's Pam telling Robin, you need to learn to say no. You need to keep the pieces of yourself. I don't think they were close friends, but they were good friends. She saw a lot of what he was going through. Maybe I'm projecting, but I imagine that Pam Dauber was a sensible person who tried to guide Robin. His fame was big. This wasn't a case of somebody had a hit TV show and then became a has-been. Robin Williams stayed famous. By late 1980, early 81, he was probably getting used to it, but with the device of Mork getting an introductory lesson in fame, he's kind of looking back and saying, this all took me by surprise. And I'm starting to process it, but it's not easy. There's all that going on in the background. But as an episode, it's a pretty good episode. I like it. Like I said, the later parts are genuinely heartbreaking and moving. But I think also entertaining. Separating it from that background, I think it's still an interesting story. We learn things about both Mork and Mindy by how they interact with Robin. Robin Williams as a character learns something too. Yes, in a way, he's still the guy who can't say no, but I think he also appreciates that this young woman is sincere. She's not out to exploit him. She just wants to do a good story and do well at her job. And he respects that. So I like that aspect of it. I also rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures how much it supports and promotes the romantic relationship of Mork and Mindy. I'm sorry to sound like a broken record or a broken record player, but it's not a very shippy season. This has Mork and Mindy lightly touching. They work as a team. There's a bit of teasing that may or may not be platonic. There's a little bit there. I would say 1 out of 4. Obviously, it gets complicated because she really wants to meet this celebrity who looks like her roommate. I feel like this episode is a contrast to the previous episode and also to the gunfight at the Mork Corral episode with how it deals with fame and hero worship. In the gunfight episode, the Corey Feldman character admired Billy the Kid, and Mork admired Squellman the Yellow, who was a coward, and then we find out that he really hero worships Serko, who is pretty much the opposite of Squellman, very confident and suave and so on. Neither of those episodes looks at what it's like to be the person who's admired, so this is a flip side of that. I can't think of any other sitcom of the 70s or 80s that could have done this. Not exactly broken the fourth wall, not exactly torn apart the universe. There are episodes of That Girl that kind of play with things, with Danny Thomas showing up and some other things. And the That Girl thing at the beginning of the episode. Burns and Allen back in the 50s, where George would actually talk to us through the fourth wall and comment on the sitcom and stuff. But it's a different thing to get a character meeting the actor, and I feel like there may have been series after this episode, but I think at that time in 1981 there's something almost naughty about it, something playful and gleeful about it, and you can hear that in the audience's reaction that, oh, Mork meets Robin Williams. This episode could have been done really badly, and it just would have been wincy, like, oh, please, we don't want to hear what a wonderful guy Robin Williams is. But this is actually surprisingly nuanced. I think that kids could enjoy it, despite the smuttiness of the word Robin. It's pretty clean. And it would have been interesting to get the daycare kids' reactions, at picture day. Nothing happens with that. And we don't get Fred or Mr. Bickley in this episode either, but that's okay. It's mostly about those three, Mork, Mindy, Robin. 3 eggs, 1 heart. This is Paula Schaffner with Mork Meets Robin Williams. Reality. What a concept.
I'm Rula Lenska.
He rocks in the treetop all day long. I've been rhyming and singing his song. I do the birds on Jaybird Street. Let me the rhyming go tweet, tweet, tweet. Rock your robin, oh, rock, rock, rock your robin. Blow, rock your robin, 'cause I'm really gonna rock it tonight. Hey, every swallow, every chickadee, every bird and tall the tree. The wild owl, the big black crow, flapping their wings, singing go, bird, go, rock your robin, oh, rock, rock, rock your robin.